Alright, let's do it. We're waiting. We're waiting. Come on, Maxi boy. Starting soon. Ian Talk. Hey, hi. That's Gary. Very pixelated. Doesn't really put too much effort into. Oh, we're muted. Here we go.
Good. It does look good. Excellent. We are here live with.
We're
Ian.
live.
First time we're actually meeting. I don't think we've ever actually spoken before.
Right off the bat with the fucking Wrath of Lich King classic background. Nice, Ian. Nice touch. Talking about Dragonflight though, but whatever.
I know you mentioned in a couple other interviews you had seen some of my videos and talked about it with like the AMZ thing, which was pretty funny.
Yep. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Thank you for giving us the ammunition to make some changes we wanted to make. It's always appreciated.
Okay. All right. Well, okay. They're going to be mad about that, but that's fine. Okay. But yeah, so I just want to get right into it because we have like a pretty limited amount of time. So the first thing I wanted to talk to you about is actually season 4. So I think, first of all, the community loves it. At best, I think it's a great new idea that can, revolutionize the end of expansions gameplay. Very worst, honestly, is just objectively better than a super long season 3. So basically, what are some of your thoughts about season 4? And if you've had any time during Dragonflight to think about maybe if it could be brought back or improved upon?
Yeah. I mean, thank you for, those thoughts and those reactions. I think it's been overall super happy with how it's played out. Definitely, some bumps the first week, especially with scaling issues. We never really used that tech at this.
Yo, really, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Thank you. I got to watch this video for our stream for our podcast tomorrow. Appreciate it. Sniped, it's going on. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you. All right, we just started. Max is asking about season 4 and how fucking litty McTitty it is. So I think everyone agrees. Season 4 is Litty McTitty. Yo, dude, what's going on?
Scale before, so we had to work out some of the kinks in the system there. But I think we went into this hoping that it would play out largely the way it had. And if it did, that this could become something that we go to in the future at the very end of an expansion.
Yeah, cool.
In those last few months, everyone knows the next expansion's on the horizon. You finish the story, you finish the current expansion's content. It's just kind of a remix and a chance to revisit kind of the greatest hits of the expansion as a whole. Tuning has been definitely something we've been looking at. Like I think now that people have more gear,
I'm not going to pause everything, but yeah, tuning has been, I would say, probably the worst thing about season 4, and it's very disappointing because they always want us to go onto PTR and do things. And while I wasn't one that would just go and spam Mythic Plus and PTR because reasons. Players like Max, they went and did it, and I don't know, somehow it doesn't translate over to when it goes live, because even now we're now week 4 into season 4 and they're still putting out like tuning hotfixes. I don't know, it's fucking annoying. Lions, don't trust him. He doesn't lie. Ian doesn't lie. You leave Ian alone. I feel like Shadowlands is pretty bad outside of P1. P4 is extremely good. I would say it's probably on season 4 is amazing, really good.
Happy with where that's landed, and we definitely heard a lot of feedback, especially the first couple of weeks, from like Hall of Fame and Cutting Edge, but not guilds like your guild. That it felt too much like reprogression, and it's like then we go look at logs and realize like, look, you guys wiped like 5 times, then killed the boss. Like that's not really progression, but I get it, right? Like, it feels like you've already learned this fight. It feels like you've already killed the boss.
Yeah.
You expect to just go in and win, but we want there to be a little bit of a challenge. So I think overall it's played out pretty much the way we wanted to.
All right, great, yeah, and some other things that were added during season 4 outside of the actual gameplay element of faded affixes and raids. Were a lot of the like loot acquisition systems. So you had to create a few new unique ones because of the way the raids would be rotating. But I kind of wanted to ask you about them. So like Dinar and the upgrade essences from Heroic and Mythic.
Amazing.
Like I said, I think they're excellent.
Yep.
Is there a chance that we could actually see a truncated version of this in a regular season that would maybe help with loot targeting? So an idea for that is like currently someone could do an entire Mythic Sanctum raid every week and never see a Jathis maybe.
True.
It would have to be much less, but like what could that look like?
I think something like this.
Bit louder?
Sure.
Yeah, sure.
Kind of like the season, the season structure itself. we see this as a time for experimentation, and experiments aren't necessarily going to be carried forward in their exact form, but the idea of like anti-RNG backstops and some feeling of security and guarantee that you will eventually get that chase best in slot item you want.
Yeah, those
feels
dinar
like a useful
coins
thing
are
for
very
us to
fucking good.
explore.
I'm very happy they implemented
the
it.
dinar system, I think, in terms of how upfront it is and how quickly you're getting some things, that is probably way more accelerated than we would ever do in a regular news season. I think there's a couple of reasons for that.
Yeah,
One
it's
is,
fair
like,
enough.
The 3-week rotation means that you just get fewer shots at getting these items. Also, like psychologically, most of these are items that you already had. Like, it's while it was
True.
relevant, you got your Jathis, you got your
Good
Sylvanas
point, Ian.
daggers, whatever else, and so you're having to re-earn them.
And he's pro
And
gaslighter.
I think it would, to some extent, I
Dude,
think more than some
what?
extent.
What's with the Ian hate, son? You leave Ian alone. He's all right. He's doing his best. He's doing his best, dude.
I think it would diminish the feeling of chasing after that like real trophy item if just week 3 or week 4
Thank
of a brand new
you.
tier,
Thanks for following.
maybe even before you like kill the boss that dropped it on a specific difficulty, everyone could just walk in and get their item. But yeah, like ups and downs and being excited about a loot jackpot has value, but feeling like you could do all the right things but never get it is definitely a bummer. We want to see what we can do about that going forward.
Okay.
Sweet, yeah. And I think also you're going to kind of have a little bit of that reintegrated into every season going forward as well with like the new Mythic Plus pool, right? Like part of you're doing a bunch of new Mythic Plus dungeons. You're also going to see a bunch of new, potentially best in slot or very interesting trinkets and things to try.
Yeah.
So you're going to have a lot of more loot to kind of go around.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because that's like one for me who doesn't really Mythic Plus too much. One of the things that's so fucking annoying is the fact that you have to refarm the same gear every season. It's so frustrating. But if they're implementing new dungeons each season, or new old dungeons, it just freshens it up that little bit. In Europe, we run out of gas, and come and save us. He's...
Okay, so then another thing, that's it about Season 4. I kind of just wanted to talk to you about like current raid accessibility in WoW. So I've heard you speak a lot about, you know, like people always ask about 10 mans and stuff, and I think I actually really agree with like 20 mans in WoW with how many specs there are and how vast and variable the different types of combat styles and also the ways that specs deal with that exists. I think 20 man is excellent, but I think there are a lot of things in the game where maybe the barrier of entry could be questioned at that point. So I think the first one I would want to talk about is actually the Mythic Raid lockout currently. So I think this exists where a lot of guilds, let's just say they want to do prototype Pantheon, and they're looking, there's a guild raid. They don't want to cancel the raid. They need 2 people. Well, it's going to be really hard for someone to sign up for that group maybe if they really want loot from Skolex and Vigilant Guardian, and they're like, I don't want to get myself locked into this group's raid if I'm not going to continue or if we don't kill it. Basically, what I'm asking is, do you think maybe the Mythic Lockout is outdated in 2022?
Yes, it
and
is.
would maybe,
100%. It's
help a
100%
thriving
outdated.
pug system of more raids being able to happen at the 20-man raid size?
So what I'm hearing is you want to do more splits, Mythic split.
It's outdated, but the thing is, don't they put the lock on Mythic to curb like carries and shit or something? Don't they? Because of like the Chinese guilds. I think that's what they did. All the restrictions feel bad. Yeah, I mean, they have to have some sort of restrictions, but yeah, I definitely feel like the Mythic Plus one is definitely outdated. I also think, to a certain extent, like holding out on the Hall of Fame is silly. Remove loot from Mythic, dude. I don't know what that's just crazy talk. That's crazy talk.
Splits, more mount sales.
Now,
all of that.
This is something that always gets brought up to me, that this would honestly be something I dread about it, but I honestly think a lot of stuff that is a side effect where what we do is more crazy, that sounds miserable, I think it could be potentially much better for a lot of other people in the game.
So it could be. So I think when you talk about pugs, for sure, you know, the rigid lockout system for Mythic is inconvenient for pugs.
Extremely
I think
inconvenient.
at its core,
Uh-oh.
Mythic raid difficulty isn't really meant for pugs. People will pug
That's a
it
good
later
point,
on in
yeah.
the season for sure, especially on bigger servers.
But what about like
Certainly,
towards the
you know,
end?
in season 4 like this, where the fights are much better known, the tuning's more forgiving, sure. But it's one of those things where like the lockout is an example of a little bit of healthy friction. We talk about, you know, friction that can have social benefits, like, you know, stuff that was removed when we added Raid Finder, Dungeon Finder back in the day. this is one of those examples in that joining a Mythic raid is a little bit of a commitment. And I could argue that
I can understand
upside
like that
for
mentality.
pugs as well, which is that, if you're doing a Mythic Nathria pug, kill Shriekwing, and then suddenly, things aren't going great on Altamore, it's a great reason not to bail on that group. It's a great reason to not have a quarter of the group say, "Now these guys don't get it. I'm out. I'm going to find another group," because you're locked for the week. You're together with them.
You have to figure it out.
Yeah, and like that, I think that actually encourages somewhat stronger social bonds, reliance on others. At the same time, I get it if you just want to jump in and get one boss, but I think the downsides to the overall Mythic ecosystem, if we just removed that lockout and made them flex, would outweigh the upsides. And there's a reason why like normal and heroic are designed to be much more inherently flexible in structure, pug friendly. That's why those work that way. That's why Mythic still works the old way.
Okay, cool. So no plans to change that. And yeah, the split thing, the split thing would definitely be a very unintended side effect from that. Like the absolute terror of potentially seeing like Scott message and be like, okay, everyone show up tomorrow. We're going to be boosting Mythic Jailer for like 12 hours. Something. I mean, oh my Lord, would that be bad? Okay, so I agree with that. Another thing, just along the lines of accessibility. So in BFA, you guys came out with the Hall of Fame with the whole like Horde versus Alliance thing. Yeah,
what are they going to do about Hall of Fame?
And it became the trigger for cross-realm being available. So the game has seen multiple issues recently to make the game more accessible, so cross-faction being a major one, and then also with the region-wide auction house. Is there any possibility we could get cross-realm at the beginning or earlier in the season?
Yeah, get rid of it.
Now that
just get rid of it.
Hall of Fame is less relevant.
Get rid of it.
Yeah, I think it's like I don't think we're likely to do it right from the very beginning, though we're moving in that direction. We did it for Sepulchre before the Hall of Fame was full. I think it's likely we're going to repeat that again for Vault going forward. In general, the game as a whole, I think, is moving at tearing down server boundaries. We want to make more and more things cross-server. I think we recognize.
Here we go.
15 years ago, back in Classic, if you log into Classic,
they can't make it faction
specific
anymore.
Of sort of insular, self-contained communities where you're seeing the same people over and over again, and there's a lot of upsides that offset the downsides of some of these restrictions. I think in the modern game, really, server increasingly feels like restrictions without as much upside, and so we are systematically working at chipping away at all of those divisions. It just takes time.
Okay, so yes, they're going to.
When we get to a point where things like potentially cross-server guilds down the line and so forth are on the table, I think fully cross-server raids from the start will be automatic.
Okay, perfect.
But for now, we want to, while we're working towards it, we want to make sure we're not, pulling the rug out from our existing social structures. And so earlier, but not day one.
Okay, great.
Awesome.
So, and again, just the two more questions basically about raid accessibility. And the main one would be actually talking about something you guys have previously done with cross-faction. I think largely this has been really, really good for the game. Obviously, there's still a few things, like it's a little clunky to invite sometimes cross-faction, and then also there's some situations currently with, like raid lockouts. Like if you were to race change previously, like let's say for Skolex you want to go be Dwarf in your alliance, and that's already fine. Now it's perfectly realistic for you to be able to race change to maybe Blood Elf and still raid with your guild, but it will like brick your Mythic lockout. So I think something that can solve this, and something you guys have spoke on before, is basically is there any progress being made to the technical limitation of cross-faction guilds? Is it something maybe mid-expansion?
I was probably the only person that was like super anti cross-faction anything. I'd like to I know it had to be done. I would have loved to a point where we didn't have to, but I totally get why it's done. And now that it's been implemented, it's really, I'm glad that they did it. Because even like if you're out in the outside world, you can still fuck up Horde, right? But when you need to, you can run in and do a dungeon. For them to do cross-realm, cross-faction guilds, at this point, I don't really care too much. If it helps people raid more, then so be it. Dark Ale, you mentioned so you can still have a Hall of Fame, do a top 100, but can do like cross-faction guilds. Yeah, that would make sense, because the Hall of Fame for both Alliance and Horde is just so outdated, and like you said, just with like the faction imbalance, it just doesn't work anymore. So yeah, I think getting cross-faction, doing a limited 100, 200 Hall of Fame for all the guilds, I'm down for that.
Longer than that, do you think?
There's definitely progress being made. It's something we want to do. It's not really responsible for me to commit to a time frame. I would say I would like us to do it before the next expansion.
Okay.
But it's in the hands.
Yeah, Jojo Cheney. Yeah, I know. I think that's a bit weird.
A lot of these changes
well
are pulling on a thread in, code and systems that have been built to work a certain way for 20 years and realizing like, hey, this is trickier than we expected. It may be easier than we expected. We'll see. But definitely recognize.
Okay, so it's coming. So cross-faction guilds are coming.
Some groups have had people faction change. They want to keep raiding together and not being able to share the same guild chat, the same guild repairs, guild bank, etc.
I wonder if it'll ever go like cross-realm guilds or something.
A lot of the other stuff you talked about, I think a lot of those are what I would consider bugs. There's a few that we're working on tracking down specifically with cross-faction whispers or invites.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in a group with somebody, if you've applied to the group finder group, if you're trying to reply to a message, like all of that should just work. Anytime it fails to work, that's a bug. But the thing we want to make sure is that, there's some opt-in connection. You're not just getting a whisper from a random, cross-faction person that, ganked you in the outdoor world or whatever. And then also similarly, I think faction change, that's just something we need to change. Like the fact that it stops your lockout
that's
is a vestige of how the system was built when, of course, two people of opposite factions couldn't be in the same raid in the same lockout. You just nuked your old one to avoid that collision. We shouldn't be doing that now. But again, that's an example of an old system that needs to be updated.
Sweet.
I get it.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. So this is a big one, and this is again, I've heard your philosophy on this multiple times. The WoW has gone through a very long history of going back and forth between bring the player or the class. So last expansion, playing perfectly optimally, there was about 7 spots in a 20-man raid that were basically required with something that you could not really replace with another class.
He's gonna fucking. I feel like he's gonna talk about raid buffs. I really hope he doesn't, but he doesn't like raid buffs for whatever reason.
Expansion so far, again, taking a few liberties, but even leaving a few out, there's a bit closer to 12. Speaking for a not world first or high level cutting edge team who will probably make it work regardless, but more for the 10 to 15 man AOTC level teams that might not have some very powerful buffs or might have to swap classes play something they maybe don't like as much to make themselves more powerful. I understand a lot of people don't need to be fully optimal, but basically, can you explain your philosophy around raid buffs and how it's differed from X-Back to X-Back, where some classes were not required?
I like it. It adds flavor.
Yeah, so okay.
Do you like being asked to pressure arcane intellect?
That was
a long question.
I do,
I do. Like, I guess. Some of it is stuff you've mentioned that I've talked about in the past, but I think the origins of bring the player, not the class, were like the extreme other end of the spectrum back in late Burning Crusade, where it wasn't just raid buffs, it was a matrix of party buffs. And it was, as people saw in BC raiding, well, you need a rogue in the group with a warrior to give battle shout. The warrior needs Wind Fury or they're bad. And sometimes you'd have somebody who's a good player, plays a class that's theoretically good, but you don't have room for them in your specific raid party matrix. And so they can't contribute. That felt clearly not what we wanted. And we moved away from that steadily. But I think where we're moving back towards is class mattering, making sure that the best raid composition, if you want to be optimal, is one that has representation of all 12, soon to be all 13 classes.
Yes.
And that's 20-player Mythic raid format supports that. I think that's something that is friendly for pugs as well in a flex raid setting. Like if you're a pug leader, you're trying to recruit the optimal group, get a group together. If you don't have a warlock, you should be looking for a warlock. If you don't have a hunter, you should be looking for a hunter, as opposed to which is the meta.
The only thing I feel like they should do, like I'm happy with the way it is now. The only thing I feel like they should do is add another class that has fucking port. Because there's no other class in... I'm trying to think. Yeah, port is like the only one that is like heavily used in raiding, like fucking heavily used, like to like deal with mechanics, even sometimes negate mechanics. I'm trying to think if there's any other class that completely like changes the way. Yeah, I don't think there is. Like I feel like there needs to be another class with port. Like add some flavor to it as well, but don't I don't want all classes to lose their identity at the same time.
Range spec this tier. Let me just bring 5 of them and we're good to go. That helps provide social opportunities for the full range of players. Now, that said, we want to make sure that none of these buffs feels too impactful to the point that it's like, you can't go without it. It's utterly mandatory at multiple levels of play, not just, the top tier level. In that case, we want to look at things like tuning. We want to look at things like alternate buff items that can provide.
So they're not going to remove buffs, is what he's basically
or
saying.
Just increasing availability. I think the two most classic ones in this space are, Bloodlust, Battle Res. I think no group
Yeah.
at almost any level is
Yep.
going to go without them. The percentage of classes that brings
Warlocks
those
and Bandits,
buffs
yeah, they
has
are.
decreased naturally over the years. That's something we're looking at changing. So a little
Majority of
scoop
the
for
time.
you. I think you'll probably see this in the next beta build, or next alpha build rather.
Uh-oh.
Evokers will bring Bloodlust, so we'll have a fourth Lust class in the mix. We're also looking at adding
It's so
Battle Res to one
crazy
more
to
class.
me that they're adding in another class with Lust. I mean, we have mages, we have shamans. To a certain extent, you could argue fucking hunters, right? Or marksmen or whatever. Is it no marksman? I don't know. Whatever hunters can press Lust sometimes if they have the pet, right? But like, why? I don't think we need another Lust class. I really don't think we need it over another class with Port. And Summon. Like, just give us another class to summon people as well.
Possibly Paladins, likely Paladins, but don't 100% quote me on that.
Okay.
Okay, so Paladins are getting a battle res as well.
And then for the rest, we want to take a step back and look at the whole ecosystem now that we've explored the space of individual buffs, on the class level. We don't want to close that door and say, no, we're not doing this. But it's absolutely possible that when you take all 38 specs in their totality, there's just too much of this now, and we're too close to the Burning Crusade space, at which point, over the next month, we'll want to pull back on some of those.
Okay.
But, yeah.
All right, yeah. So actually, I will have a follow-up question on that, because that was actually, first of all, that was an amazing answer. Thank you for that. But so when you talk about a scenario where, okay, if you are trying to play optimally, you maybe will want to have one of every spec.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of polarizing versions of raid utility right now that I kind of want to hear your opinion on. So currently, I think of how many classes are there now? Is it 13 with Evokers?
Yep.
Okay, with 13 classes, I think 10 have ones where they have either an hour-long raid buff that is basically irreplaceable, or are in some way bringing them to raid. Like, for example, Warlocks don't have them, but if you've been around, Gateways, Hellstones, Summons, Wipe Recovery, all those things are extremely powerful, and you need one of those classes. How do you look at abilities like DK's Death Grip, where it's not a class you need to have in the raid every pull, but if there is a raid boss or a dungeon or something that requires grips, that is as important or more important than that. So how do you balance between classes that just have a button that puts them in the raid versus classes that have such strong situational utility where they're needed?
These are really good
immensely
questions.
For small things, but not for every boss.
So you're asking us to nerf Death Grip, in other words. No.
That's the opposite of what I'm saying.
No, I know.
Yeah.
Honestly, carefully. Needed is the thing that shouldn't be something that we're building in encounters, certainly on non-mythic difficulties. If having knockbacks, having Death Grip, having a certain tool makes your life a bit easier in normal and heroic, great. And again, pug leaders, especially, pug leaders are encouraged to, it's flex raid for a reason. Look for a Death Knight. There's a ton out there who are actively looking for groups.
Mm-hmm.
Get one in, it'll help you. Philosophically, we talk about normal versus heroic. I think part of the difference there, a normal mode is pugs, but also just really casual friends and family groups that are just there to play with each other.
Hell yeah,
they're not looking to bring strangers into their group. They're not necessarily looking to recruit to get a certain class or re-roll. We want to make sure that at that difficulty, you can succeed regardless. You can succeed with a very suboptimal comp as long as you have the basics
That's
covered.
good.
At
So they
heroic
should.
level, to some extent, the difference there, even if you're not cutting edge mythic, there's some challenge, there's some coordination. You care about success. You're not going to bring along a person who's doing 50% less damage than everybody else if you're failing to meet a DPS check. And so in that space, bringing in classes that can help you is useful. If it's ever literally impossible, then we're going to probably make mechanical changes to the encounter. We're going to give you more time. We're going to, make a cast interruptible. We'll do something there. So it's not just ridiculously punishing if you don't have that specific class. Honestly, though, things like Death Grip, we would like more of those because it's so cool. Because it's more than just 5% damage.
But then if everyone gets,
passive buff,
if classes all get
it
that
lets you shape
level
your
of
strategy,
coolness,
and I
the
think lets
abilities, it
player
takes
who
away
plays the Death
from
Knight,
ones
they
like
may,
Death Grip.
resent having to run out and do some utility at the expense of their parse here or there. It lets them feel like they have a special role that's contributing to their group's success.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. Also, just because chat's definitely these DKs are wild, but yeah, I was more kind of along the lines of implying I think it's hunters, DKs, and shamans, I believe, that are the only class in the game basically that has situational fight utility instead of just they have something that makes them in all the time. So I was kind of just saying like maybe if you did actually want where like okay you will always have at least one of these, so you have 7 spots now to fill with just what you want if you're being optimal. Obviously you don't have to be if you're being optimal, and then you have that. But currently there are, I think it's only, you're kind of trending in this direction, so maybe we haven't seen the full vision of it, but like there is still I think like 2 or 3 classes that don't have something that puts them in the raid all the time.
Rogues would be one,
Yeah,
right?
I think
I don't think rogues have any fucking
ultimately,
utility.
I mean, we are looking at
rate
representation
utility.
across, just what the actual stats are. We want to have something we feel is a good idea, something that's elegant, that's not, it's easy to say.
I mean, they have
okay,
battle res.
This class has nothing. They get some new passive 3% stat buff. Now everyone has to.
Yeah, rogues are
But that
fucked.
feels like a cop out. So it's like, if there's a representation problem that we need to solve, and we're coming up with a good idea, we want to move in that general direction, but not at the expense of elegant design.
Excellent. And actually, this actually isn't even a question. I just wanted to bring something up on the note of like bringing classes to raids and make sure it's accessible.
Commanding show.
Along something that's often forgot about when talking about the DK thing we talked about at the beginning of this interview, where it was the video you were watching was not about DKs. It was about melee representation in raids. And I want to say since that video, you guys have actually done a very good job at that. This expansion so far, Sanctum and Sepulcher, as opposed to like the normal comp, you've been able to stack basically as much melee in both of those raids on every boss as much as possible, and that has not happened before previously in WoW.
No, Tokepanda, thanks so much for the raid. Appreciate it.
Made there,
love you, buddy.
It didn't actually trivialize melee, which was my fear for it, and it did make them more accessible. So just thank you for that.
Cool, thank you, and yeah, kudos to the encounter team. Really, I mean, it's something we talked about as an active goal. Like, how can we get ideal raid representation and melee versus range balance better representing our actual class mix, and do that without, like you said, just making the fights patchwork for melee, because that was the traditional way back in the day of like, all right, these mechanics just don't target melee, cool, they can just stand there and punch the boss for 5 minutes, but that's not a good experience for them either.
Yeah. And then just one more last thing before we move on to Mythic Plus. So you did mention something about if you need to, you would potentially add them back, but just to specifically ask so if you feel like it's hard enough to get certain things in the game, you guys are not opposed to potentially bringing back the scrolls that existed in BFA, or potentially maybe not buffing Lust Drums back to what they are, because you just added.
That's actually you can bring back scrolls could help.
But I mean, I think we're open to it. I think part of the challenge there is also when you think about where the scrolls are used, they're not just a raid consumable; they become a mandatory consumable for every dungeon situation.
Runes are just a bit of
help. By definition, you're not going to have class representation because you can't. And then it also starts to turn into like, well, wait, so the thing that I bring as a warrior, as a druid, whatever, is like a 2% better version of this buff, where people don't have to spend gold on a consumable. Like, that just makes their contribution feel less cool. So ideally, we would want to find a middle ground, whether maybe that's reducing the baseline power or otherwise tuning, so that
don't nerf AI, dude.
Like, cool, we have this class. This is a benefit that we have, and the difference between having it and not is in, something that you can't overcome otherwise.
Okay, and just one more note that it just popped up to me: this expansion in Shadowlands, as opposed to before, you actually you have consumables you use at like the beginning of a dungeon or beginning of a raid fight that is actually in a much higher number than you did previously. So you have like the armor kits, you have the sharpening stones,
and the thing is, I don't know why Max doesn't like these consumables. So I'm going to ask him, he's probably going to ask if they're going to continue, but like your weapon oils, armor kits, like pots and stuff, he doesn't like them. I love them. I think modern day WoW, like retail WoW, the economy is so bad for like professions and things like that. And I think like that's the like classic era, so even classic TBC and Wrath, that's what they have really big over retail, is like a really strong, healthy economy. Like, I shouldn't say that with fucking the way people are gold buying, but you know what I mean. Like, professions are really strong. They're meaningful. They're impactful. They're trying to bring that back with Dragonflight, but yeah, I think I don't want any more consumables than what we have now. I think we're at a really good spot, but yeah, I don't know why he just doesn't. He's not a fan of them.
Do you guys see that?
I like them. He's a bit of RPG flair. I agree.
That's a good question. I think we've probably gone a bit too far there. And I
Oh
think as we're
no!
nailing down, just finalizing professions for Dragonflight, want to take a step back and see what the
Why
sum
would
total of that
why
experience
would you
is,
take
right?
a step back from the amount of consumables we have when you're trying to make professions impactful again? That doesn't make sense to me.
I think a lot of those examples that you gave were things that we did to make blacksmiths and leatherworkers, frankly, feel more relevant, feel like they had something
Mhm.
that, other than the legendary crafting templates, they could sell that was part of the economy. Dragonflight is solving that problem on 5 other levels. So, a world where you need to apply 5 or 6 things, it makes each one of them less meaningful and
It's
also
not
just
five,
general
six
economic.
things. Like, what is it? It's a fucking oil that lasts an hour. It's a flask that lasts an hour. Runes, okay, runes, I'll give you that. Runes, you have to do that every pull, and food, you have to do that every pull. And your armor kit, so that's 5. And your armor kit persists is 2 hours, and it persists through death. So there's only 2 that you have to reapply every pull. I don't think that's that bad.
Burden of like doing runs, doing the content probably gets to be higher than we want it to be.
Okay. So that's all.
But you do,
it for
yeah, but
Raid.
that's
I
like
just have
way
a few more
later.
questions about Mythic Plus.
Sure.
So the Mythic Plus system in Dragonflight, kind of getting a sneak peek of it in Season 4. So I think it'll actually, probably be a lot better now that you've had a run at retuning some old raids, which has been really nice. The only thing that I could kind of think of as a potential downside is that what happens if, in Season 1, you run into one of your new Dragonflight dungeons that is just extremely good. It is like the key that people want to run, not because it's easy to time. It's just like this key is so very fun. You can think of many. A lot of people have different opinions of these, but like what that would be. It may sadden Mythic Plus players that they have an amazing dungeon and they don't get to play it for a long time. So basically, what I'm asking is, what's the balance of good versus new?
So in case you didn't know how they're going to tackle Mythic Plus going forward into Dragonflight, is they're going to have rotating dungeons. They're obviously going to have a set amount of dungeons that you can do in Heroic and maybe even Mythic. No, I don't even think Mythic. But say Season 1's going to have a select few of Dragonflight dungeons, and they're going to bring in some old ones. I think for the first season in Dragonflight, they're bringing ones in like is it Cloud Serpent? I don't know. One of the temples from fucking Mop. I can't remember. It's been like 10 years, 12 years, whatever. And they're going to like change it up. And what his basic question is like, yeah, if you have a really fun dungeon that's in Season 1, you probably won't see that again for the rest of the expansion, if not very much later on.
And if anything, you might not be able to speak on this because it's kind of in the future, but like, do you have any plans for Season 3 or 4 of Mythic Plus? As at that point, you've kind of shown what you'll do in Season 1 and 2, right? You'll have 4 Dragonflight and 4
Just open it up.
Maybe to bring back some old favorites.
Yes, I think we definitely have room to revisit, maybe tweak or update, or just revisit as they were if everyone loves them, a dungeon later on in the season. I think Season 2 is almost certainly going to be.
I would agree with that, Snipes. I think, Season 1 should just be everything.
Ones.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Beyond that, I think, one thing the structure does is also gives more room for us to potentially add all new dungeons over the course of an expansion. Something we would like to get back to doing more of. I think back in Legion, when we last did this, one of the quick challenges that we ran into was integrating a brand new dungeon into a pool of dungeons that the community had already mastered.
Mm-hmm.
Like when Cathedral Mythic Plus rolled out.
Oh, this is such a good point.
That was a super dead key for a long time, even more so with
well.
Secret of 500.
Yeah.
Yep. And like, it wasn't actually like the challenges. It wasn't they were, in some cases they were actually harder, but like beyond that, it wasn't that they were that much harder. It's that you were comparing a dungeon the community had 1 week of knowledge of to a dungeon they had been running, for over a year. But treating them equally in terms of rewards, in terms of what challenge they were supposed to offer. When we have all new pools, that's not an issue anymore. So I think as we look towards the later seasons, if there's new dungeons introduced, that actually naturally goes there. We definitely can revisit any favorites from the first 8 while continuing to rotate through cool legacy dungeons.
Excellent. That is a perfect answer. And then also just a question about gear. So this gets brought up a lot, but I just kind of want to maybe phrase it in a little bit different way.
I think I know what he's going to ask.
So with Mythic Plus becoming more of an endgame avenue for people, is there a potential to add higher level loot acquisition for people who are doing top world level keys specifically? So like obviously rating and PvP both get functionally higher eye level, but a lot of people exclusively Mythic Plus.
The only issue with that is I totally get it. If there's people who out there just want a Mythic Plus, they're going to Mythic Plus, right? And the argument is, hey, I'm Mythic Plus at a really high level. Why can't I get gear that's equivalent to, say, Mythic rating. I think Mythic rating is harder. There's more time investment involved, so I think you should be rewarded with that time. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard, man. It's hard because there's some people that just don't want a fucking Mythic Plus. I mean, don't want a Mythic raid. They just want a Mythic Plus, so it's hard. I don't know. I mean, interested to see what he says.
Exists where it is kind of the same thing as killing maybe the last two bosses on Mythic, even though obviously you don't have to, find 20 people to raid with, and then one is spammable for loot, and one of them is a weekly lockout.
Yeah.
All of that included.
It's hard,
Have
man.
you guys had any more thoughts on that?
I think there is a key level that exists. It's definitely a different key level for lower Karazhan than Workshop, but that's one of the challenges too. This spammability of it definitely is a factor. That's something we've grappled with when it comes to Mythic Plus loot since its introduction back in Legion. Because of how varied dungeon pools are, because of just the social factors of if someone's running a dungeon on a Saturday, we don't want people feeling like, well, I'm already locked for the week, or I've already maxed out on my loot for the week, so I don't want to run it with you. That's led us to every dungeon run gives you some loot, but of course balancing that against weekly throttled systems like just raids and PvP means that if it's too rewarding, we just completely killed raiding. And I would argue that one of the problems for not Mythic guilds so much, but normal and heroic guilds right now, is the tension between raid rewards and Mythic Plus rewards. If you're in a group progressing through heroic over the course of a season, but half of your raid is running 15s outside of raid time, you don't really need that raid loot anymore. And that increasingly causes division within the group, even between people who are doing Mythic Plus and people who aren't.
So special cosmetics is dead. Yeah, I do think the Mythic Pluses need to be rewarded for pushing high keys. Yes, they have like that 1% title or whatever it is. But outside that, they don't really get much. Outside the portals, and to a certain extent, like 20s aren't even high anymore. Like you can't, like 20s, like fucking hell, even I've got a couple of 20s, you know what I mean? So it's not they're not hard. But those people who are pushing, into the 30s and shit, yeah, they should be rewarded with something. But again, like Ian said, you don't want to kill the raiding scene. Like raiding has been like a core part of World of Warcraft since the beginning, right? And I'm still very adamant that the best gear should come from raiding, in my opinion.
Anyway, all of that said, the direction I think we'd like to move in, but I don't have specific changes to announce, is on the one hand, actually trying to, between tuning and rewards, bring that baseline down a little bit, or at least bring the baseline challenge up a little bit so that there's more of more parity between raid, dungeon, PvP rewards in that space.
What do you
mean? But
mean?
at the same time, find ways to let Mythic Plus players reach the top of the mountain. Like whether it's, I don't know, whether there's some level that you clear in your Great Vault that lets you get Mythic end boss quality loot or whatever else.
Well, you do.
We'd like to make them truly equal in that sense, but there's some problems to solve along the way.
Yeah, definitely.
No, you
There's
don't really.
I think this season kind of showcased what can happen to the heroic raid difficulty by having Mythic Plus available for, like, you uncapped Valor, for example, right? So if you just went hard enough and you farmed literally +2s and enough Valor, like anyone can do them.
Yeah.
You can get full 298 gear, and you will not want any single drop out of heroic, basically, except for the last boss. So there's a level there of balancing to where like baseline Mythic Plus. Okay, I haven't thought about it like that before. Thank you.
But at the high end, like I think there's absolutely every bit as much skill that goes into
you can just do Vault,
pushing really, really high keys. We should be rewarding that equally. We just have to find a way to do it.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. All right, well, that's actually
that's a good answer.
Through basically all the main stuff I wanted to talk about. I do have a few more questions about like class trees and dragon riding.
Sure.
So with how fun and successful dragon riding, for the few of us who've been able to actually try it yet, hopefully soon a lot more people get it in their hands. It is unbelievable. I think it like fully transcends flying. In fact, it's so good that I feel like it just flying normal.
Flying dragon. If those of you who haven't done dragon flying on the alpha yet, dragon flying is like a completely new experience. It doesn't even feel like you're playing WoW. It's so unique to WoW. Like, yeah, and people will be like, oh, it's in Guild Wars 2, bro. They stole it from Guild Wars 2. Good. I'm glad they stole it from Guild Wars 2 because it's fucking fun. But when it comes from, like, just World of Warcraft, it is, like, so new and refreshing. It's, like, yeah, for the first time, like, you glide up and just, like, go soaring. It's fucking, yeah, it's amazing.
normally just feels bad because of how good the system is. Are there any thoughts or plans in the future to allow dragon riding in the open world, potentially some race content in old zones, stuff like that?
That's certainly one of those things we started talking about pretty quickly once initial alpha impressions came in. I mean, I think we built the system focused on Dragon Isles so that we really didn't have as many of the guardrails in designing it that we might have had if we were building it from day one as an evergreen game-wide system. A challenge here is also, not the specific mounts, the dragon ride we built to support dragon riding.
Yeah.
We want to be very mindful of preserving players' investment and just the
like how you can do dragon riding on like
mounts
one of the
that many people have
flying like
collected. They
engineering
spent years
mounts.
farming up. If suddenly those mounts are consigned to the dust heap because they
Exactly.
can't do all the cool dragon riding
Yeah,
stuff,
exactly.
that feels like a problem.
Yep.
All that said, when we introduce any one of these features, our hope is that it's awesome enough that people don't want to say goodbye to it, that we want to carry it forward, for the rest of the game's future. And so far, this is looking to be landing in that space. So we're very happy about that. Recognize that when Dragonflight is behind us, when we're leaving the Dragon Isles, people are not going to feel great about going back to their old, just, floating.
So that makes me think that they're not going to touch dragon riding. I mean, obviously they might touch it, but we're not going to get anything remotely close to dragon riding in the old world until the very end of the expansion. And then even then, it's sort of indefinite. That's the takeaway
we want to
I
have
took.
a solution when we get there.
Right,
okay,
cool.
yeah. Worry about it later.
Let's see. I have two other ones. I'm trying to kind of combine them maybe to come up with something that is a little better. So
I'm okay with
so
leaving
far, the
dragon
class
riding.
trees,
As someone who's played it,
have
I'm
been
okay
excellent.
with leaving it.
The best ones give you things you haven't had before. They give you choice. Being able, maybe not even adding things you're getting, but necessarily just dropping things you don't maybe need for a specific encounter to give you a passive or another thing that will make you more powerful in what you're doing. This has been achieved through most of the specs in the game, but the feedback has been a little varied. So we've had, some specs get feedback every Friday for this entire patch so far with great changes.
Dude,
there's been other
the fact how I can't really say it too much now. My point doesn't really make sense because Mage are getting. Sorry, Mage did. I haven't looked at them extensively yet, but Mage did get some love recently. But the amount of love that Hunter is getting is insane. Hunter should not be getting this much love when it comes to Alpha and their feedback. It is insane. They get updates weekly, dude. Okay? Then you've got, fucking feral druids, dude, who are just rotting in the ground. Dude, there's so many, classes that just haven't been touched. But then fucking Hunter every week.
Classes that didn't have posts for a month, but then just got this massive dump of information that was clearly being worked on the whole time, with excellent changes, speaking about DK specifically. And then some other classes have had less updates. Basically, just asking, can there be a more standardized level of feedback between all the classes, and how has that been going for you guys?
Druids and priests, we hear you.
I know it's hard to do.
We're
Yeah,
gonna have
I know.
information soon. Apologies for the silence. I know,
Wait, what did
you
he
deserve
say?
better, and you rightly expect better.
I missed it
for you guys.
Druids and priests, we hear you. We're gonna have information soon. Apologies for the silence.
Druids as a whole, dude. Not just feral.
You rightly expect better. Ideally, yes, we would have had, just more even-handed communication across the board.
What's going on here? We're just watching the latest Ian interview.
I know billion-dollar company and all, but at the end of the day, it's also a number of humans who can all just fit in one room together who are handling both the class design side of it and the community communication side of it.
That doesn't He asked, "Hey, why Hunter's getting all this attention and DK's getting all this attention to not druids?" And he's like, well, there's only so many people that can fit in a room." What?
And life happens.
Hire more people.
That results in gaps
they
along
did.
the way. Sometimes one developer is working on a couple of classes and has one done, but they need to get the
druids,
other one
dude.
done because understandandly players of that class are impatient. But that means in turn
Build a
they're less
bigger
focused on
room.
the
Yeah,
first one
build
for
a bigger
now, and
room,
are gonna
Ian.
get back to it. And so it's stuff like that. I know sometimes it can be helpful just to hear from us that, we don't have anything right now. We're working on it. We're going to have news for you in a couple of weeks, as opposed to just radio silence. And I think we all need to collectively work to get better at ever having the radio silence situation going on with people.
I'm sorry, but I've heard this before from Ian about like better communication from the dev team. They've been telling us this for years. I reckon they've been telling us this since like, I reckon it's like MOP or something. Dude, we know. Like, how long have they been working on the radio silence and the better communication? I could like, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. I know they've been saying it since WOD. I know that. So even if it's just WOD, like, when was WOD? When did WOD launch? Wow. 2014, so 8 years. Dude, Ian, we're on to your tricks, mate.
People are just waiting for you.
Excellent. Okay,
We
I think I have
hear
time for one more question.
Yeah, look, guys, we hear you. We hear you. So shut the fuck up.
So, first of all, that's excellent, and I just actually I don't even know if I need to end it with a question. The question isn't even that good. I just want to point out that you guys have the right idea with class trees. The ones being done at their best, and you've seen over time the ones that were a bit more problematic have obviously been a deep amount of collaboration there, and they have seen the things that have worked in other trees and moved on to others. So far, I think the fact that some of them at their very best show an unbelievable form of content, I think all of us are just really happy to see it, and just hope that all the classes kind of end up turning around with the same, because I know it's good. It's gonna be a long road, right? Because you're just now, it seems, with posts, you're getting into the tuning section, right? Where like now that you've added a bunch of new capstones, you're going to need to make sure that they all kind of make sense. They have, some of them weren't capstone nodes before. They need to really compete with each other. So you guys ready to just talk about that process?
Yeah, tuning and iteration, right? I mean, and that's going to mean replacing some talents, redesigning some things that just aren't working. But we obviously needed to get the broad foundations out there. Looking forward to raid testing, Mythic Plus, endgames, seeing people actually using these builds in different situations, and moving beyond theory crafting to playing with them. And that's the only thing that's ahead of us. And frankly, that's actually a little bit of a relief. Like at this point in Shadowlands, we still had 4 different systems to implement. It was like, cool, we got these things done. Now let's finish making conduits and Torghast powers. Here, okay, we have our first pass of the talent trees done. 100% of the team's time is going to be focused on listening, responding, iterating, and then tuning.
Unless you play Priest or
Thank
Druid.
Thank you so much for your time.
I have one super quick question for you. Just wanted to seed this as a question for you, for the community.
Oh, what's the question?
How do you guys feel about simultaneous normal, heroic, mythic release as a thing in, let's say, hypothetical future tiers?
I think, for me personally, I think, okay, so I haven't had any time to think about this, but something that I think is an issue is, like, one thing you guys have done some things to mitigate in the past is you've like had to reduce what crazy things we would do during heroic when like Mythic first comes out. But the reality is that's because we have an entire week to do degenerate things. If Mythic is out, that really solves a lot of the decision making. You'd be doing a lot of things when Mythic is out, but I mean, that is a massive source of information. I don't know. That's very overwhelming. I would need to figure that out.
Yeah,
but
no.
Chat
and to be clear, I'm super I'm not genuinely not announcing anything there.
Yeah.
We're just trying to figure out, I mean, there's holidays coming up, there's stuff going on. We want to think through how our raid rollout is going to work for the starter draft.
Oh, did they just confirm that there is going to be a raid tier at Christmas time? That's pretty much confirming it, right? Because we did the maths the other day. So the way it's worked out is it will work out that the Mythic would open a week before Christmas, because there was a leak that came out that gave away the dates of when Dragonflight was going to get released, and then we can work out when the raid tiers get the raid opens from there. And then obviously 2 weeks from the expansion lines up. So when Mythic opens, we have 1 week before Christmas. If they are suggesting we just open it all up, that's 2 weeks before Christmas. That is more than enough time to get a race in. I don't know, dude. I think that's I think you just spilt the beans there. So it sucks for World Force races. Hey, you know what doesn't suck for World Force races? The amount of money that they're gonna make. They'll be fine, dude.
And community feedback always helps.
I think it'd be. I'm not positive, but I think
2 weeks would be enough. Yeah, 100% with 2 weeks would be enough.
Especially with like the potential timing. So yeah.
Because briefly, as soon as I think it was like a week after Sepulchre closed, there was a dev interview by Athelis, who now actually works at Blizzard. He did a dev interview, and they basically said, look, Sepulchre went way too long. We are going to do our absolute best to... Because Sepulchre was basically tuned around the world, released the world first, was confirmed. It was tuned around double Legos, and it was tuned around tier pieces. All right? So... And it went for way too long. I think it went close to a month. And they basically said they're not going to do that again. So, 2 weeks? I don't know. I think it's possible.
I think the
number's going to be insane. Yep.
I'm almost positive that it's a good thing, but I would need to like actually sit down and actually think about it. So, thank you for that. That was very cool. And thank you so much for the answers.
That's confirmed. 100%.
I love hearing you talk about WoW. I'm very passionate about it, and very clearly you are too. So thank you for that.
It's a pleasure. Yeah, thank you very much, and look forward to doing it again.
All right, thanks, man.
There it is. Dude, I'm telling you, we're getting a Christmas raid, boys. Getting a Christmas raid. I hope I fucking get to cast this one. It'll be fun. I got enough time, dude. I got Christmas off.